the government has promised to provide a series of tax incentives and other facilities to attract foreign companies to invest in Indonesia's new capital city, which has begun to take shapes lately. Here today, our guest this afternoon, Bhima Yudhistira, Executive Director of Center of Economic and Law Studies, or CELIOS, is here to discuss the matter further. Pak Bhima, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, and thanks for having me.
Of course, it's our pleasure. Pak Bhima, if you don't mind, I would like to dive right into the questions about the development of the new capital city, Nusantara. First, I would like to explore a little bit more about the funding of the mega project. The government has stated that it hopes that 80% of the funding for the capital city to come from the private sector, particularly foreign investors. Now, the project is projected to reach about 523 trillion or about 35 billion US dollars. Do you think such a mega project is attractive enough for foreign investors right now?
Yeah, there's several reasons that to be considered when foreign investors were attracted to join the new capital city investments. First of all, we can see how the geopolitics changing a lot, and it creates a macroeconomic risk. And the interest rate in every countries in the world is increasing, so it making for the investor hard to find the low cost of capital, low cost of financing to funding, especially for infrastructure project that perhaps it takes more than 30 or 40 years. It depends on the project, of course, but it takes very long term for the break-even point or even for the return on investments. So in the current situation also, we see that when Pak Jokowi as a president and his ministers visiting China, visiting Singapore, we see that the outlook of the global economy also impacting the investment decisions for the long-term infrastructure project. Let's see what happened in the China domestic economy. They have property bubbles, and also in China economy, they perceive long-term slow growth, perhaps even below Indonesian economic growth. So if we project that Indonesian growth next year will be 5% to 5.3%, perhaps China will be less than Indonesia, so below 5% of the economic growth. So everyone is talking about the global macroeconomic, everyone is talking about the external conditions. So it's not that easy for Indonesian governments, Indonesian authority in Nusantara to attract global investment at this time. Even we see that many of the other investment portfolio that Indonesian offer, we have JETP coming from the G20. So it's all about energy transition mechanism and funding. But until right now, many of the developed countries, many of the international bank still wait and see. And the other factors that if we say wait and see, it's not about the global economic, but also talking about the political situations. Next year's Indonesia will having general elections, which is many see that is the Nusantara regulation will be like a continue, or is there any modifications, or even there's something kind of the political change that can help this kind of the infrastructure. So many investors, many funding from the international counterpart asking similar questions about the political and policy instability. But we see that many of the Indonesian company or conglomerates currently see that Nusantara as a long-term profitable investment. So once again, the domestic investors, domestic conglomerates see that Nusantara, which need very big housing project, very big infrastructures, water, sanitary, and also energy project, and also need a lot of the public transportations, and many of the sub project that being built in the Nusantara, that's more attracted by the domestic investors. Perhaps in this current situations, so the answer is will be like a lot of challenging, but perhaps the government will look more into domestic company, into domestic investors to fund this Nusantara capital city at the moment.
All right, Pak Bhima, thank you for your comprehensive answer. But I want to talk more now about the progress of the investment itself that is ongoing right now at the new capital city. As we know of, hundreds of foreign companies have already signed a letter of intent to invest in various economic fields in the country's future capital city, like the one you just explained now. But we learned that very few of them have actually begun their activities. Maybe you have some insights on what might be causing these investors' discouragement from going on with the development of their investments. Maybe there is some legal uncertainties or other factors. Do you know anything about this, Pak Bhima?
Yeah, of course, the legal uncertainty is one factor. Everybody is waiting for the revisions of the Nusantara or new capital regulations being held in the parliament currently. So everyone is wondering about is there any new fiscal incentive? Is there any new non-fiscal incentive apart from the tax holiday, apart from the tax allowance given by the Indonesian government? Is there anything new that attract the investors? About the land acquisitions, about perhaps the energy security in the Nusantara. So everyone is talking about the revisions of the new regulations will be coming soon. But the others, I think, fundamental things that let's talk, for instance, the investors coming from Japan, their interest more in the automotive industry, their interest more in the EV, similar with the China current investment in Indonesia. If they're talking about investing in Indonesia, they're not only talking about Java, but also they see the other Java province like in Sulawesi, in Kalimantan, but they're not talking about building the new capital city. Previously, they're talking about how to increase the value added of the raw material for critical material for EV, for energy transitions. So I think there's a different focus of the investment from various of the country. If we're talking about the Uni Emirat Arabs, they're more interested talking about the petrochemical industry in Indonesia. They're talking about the plastic industry. They're talking about downstreaming many of the raw materials. So every country, every investor, they have different opinions and different interests if we're talking about investing in Indonesia. So that's also creating some challenges because what we see here nowadays that building the new capital, I think it's not an easy task because the economic prospect is more related to the industry, it's more related to the tourism sectors, and it's more related to the, for instance, digital economy. So how to attract various of the investor coming from different countries, different perspective, to see that the new capital is actually like one basket consisting tourism, not only about the government building, but also consisting of what the industrial park and also creative economy and health sectors and the other potential sectors being built in Kalimantan or surrounding the Nusantara itself. So how to get the cake by piece and send the message clearly to the investors that building the new capital city means not only moving the government infrastructures, moving the government authorities or bureaucracy, but also creating new center of the economic growth. I think that's some challenging aspect that the government need to deliver to the potential investor. So that's why we have 100 letter of intent coming from the foreign investors, potential investors, but still very lack to do the realizations of the investment at the moment because still some of the regulations and some of the specific sub-economy or sub-sector that perhaps attract some specific investor being held at this moment.
All right, Pak Bhima, thank you so much for updating all those infos about potential investments from various countries coming into the new capital city. My last question for you, Pak Bhima, since I have you here, I would love to know your opinion about one of the government promises to provide a series of tax breaks to foreign investors that are willing to enter the new capital city. How do you think these tax rates are responded by those foreign investors? And do you think this would be enough to attract even more investment from other countries?
Yeah, we see that tax incentive is just small part of the sweetener. We call it sweetener to attract more foreign investors, foreign direct investment. But tax alone is not enough. If we compete with the Singapore, they can have hundreds perhaps models of the tax scheme that benefiting the international investors. So if we compete to the bottom to lower our tax rate, to give a lot of tax incentive, perhaps that's probability that foreign investor will come is still very, very low rates. So tax rate is one thing, but how about the procedures to get the incentive? If we learn from many of the special economic zone built by the Indonesian government, even built by the local government in several of the areas, the problem is not about the tax rate. The problem is how to get that incentive, how to have political and government stability, political and also policy stability over very long terms. How about they get the cheaper land acquisitions and also the procedures, the bureaucratic is very, very efficient. That's what the investors or potentials, contractor potentials of the developers in capital city also asking the same. So apart from having like a lower tax rate, the government can create another layer of the incentives about the land acquisitions and also how about the local government support. We know that in Nusantara there already authority having a lot of power, but also they having a local government which is East Kalimantan province that can having like a more powerful source to deal to engage and also to communicate directly with the potential investors. So many of the fronts that we need to tackle down, not only about the tax, but about the government effectiveness, about the corruption rate, and also one thing for sure is about the how to save the environment, having a highest environmental safeguard, and also participation from the local community. So many of the investors didn't need to worry that building the capital city will not hurt the environment, will not hurt the indigenous people or local community in the Nusantara. So I think that's, we call it like one basket of the investment sweetener. So tax rate, once again, is only one piece of cake. So very, very small things that investors need to be considered of.
Right, Pak Bhima, your answer there provided us with a great closing statement to our conversation. Thank you so much for your time and insights. Bapak Bhima Yudhistira, Executive Director of Center of Economic and Law Studies, or CELIOS. Once again, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time, Pak. Thank you.
Thank you.